We are live, Asha.
Excellent. Thank you everyone for joining us for our CAC meeting. We did not have a summer meeting, so we have a lot to catch up on. We haven't seen you all since June. So we're looking forward to hearing substantive updates and questions, concerns from each of our members this evening. And we will begin first with a welcome from Bart Schwartz and a welcome from Alika Humphrey-Samuel. Bart, please.
Sure. Thank you, Asha, and welcome to everyone. Since we have so much to cover today, and since it's been quite a while, I'm really not going to say too much, except again to say that we're delighted we're all together again, and looking forward to the content of this particular CAC meeting. And I think I'll turn. Do you want me to turn it over to Alika? There you are. Good. Alika, it's all yours.
Good evening, everyone. I'm not going to say much either, but I do want to make mention that my purpose of being on the calls, and we mentioned this some months ago, is different from my previous role in the city council, right? Is to make sure that HUD shows up and we hear you, we're listening, and we're communicating internally. But it does not stop at home, me receiving emails every single day, the same way I did in the council from all of my NYCHA residents and family. But the response is always different because it's from a HUD perspective. And so I just wanted to say that I continue to open up the emails every single day and share it with the PIH team. And whenever there is a news story in the media, Secretary Fudge will call, she will email, and she will say what is going on. And last week was no different from when we heard about the gas outages in some of the developments. Secretary Fudge was on it and said, I want you to provide us with a one-pager on the gas outage process and what happens not just within public housing developments, but buildings throughout New York City. And what can we do to just weigh in and figure out a better way? And so, again, I just wanted to share that. And one last thing, there have been changes that we may not see since 2019. And one of this, the accessibility and the transparency of capital repairs on NYCHA's database. And I was able to see what was happening, hear a complaint, and go directly to the website and look at the timeline of that capital repair project and where they are in the process and compare it to the outages that we see and if the timeline is accurate.
This meeting is being recorded.
And so that was a tool that we were able to utilize right away and had the information in real time. And so I just wanted to mention that because seriously, from the time we first started the CAC meetings, that was not the case. So I wanted to mention that. So I'll stop there, and HUD is here, we're listening. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Bart, for your continued leadership for the monitor team and for these CAC meetings. And thank you, Alika, for joining us as well. We really appreciate you being here on behalf of HUD and being a partner and listening and taking the concerns back and hopefully working. We know that you keep the residents top of heart and mind in all that you do. So thank you for that as well. So with that, I would then like to turn to our additional members who have updates that they would like to share. Agnes Mack from DIFTA, please. Agnes, you unmuted and then remuted. There you go.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Hi, good evening. Sorry, I
Good
had
evening.
trouble.
Good to see you.
Hi, good to see everyone. I hope everyone had a good summer and a good fall season. I would like to report that the Department for the Aging met with Chief Secreto last Thursday on October 6th and to discuss concerns about safety and security at the NYCHA development and also at our older adult centers, at and around the older adult centers. And he has been very helpful. He gave us a tip line number that the programs or residents can call in if they have any concerns about quality of life issues. And in regard to the specific safety and security concern at specific older adult centers, he will help us troubleshoot and maybe link us to the right NYPD people to help problem solve. So we're very grateful for that. I also understand that the city is launching a Big Apple Connect project whereby NYCHA residents will be getting broadband service at home. And we are also starting a pilot project at 5 of our older adult centers to start, 1 for each borough. So we're working on that. And we continue to provide nutrition education workshops at NYCHA developments from our SHINE grant and nutrition counseling service from our ACL grant.
Thank you, Agnes, for that update. And it was perfect timing that Chief Secreto joined right as you were saying that there was a recent meeting and a partnership with DFTA and NYCHA safety and security leaders because it's such an important issue. And we know that the senior centers had faced break-ins and concerns in the past. So getting that addressed expeditiously is particularly important. And again, that's really the beauty of this roundtable, where we can have all of you sitting at the table or a virtual room, if you will, to just make those connections, reach out to one another, and not have to worry about all of the red tape and bureaucracy to just have conversations and figure out solutions. So I'm glad to hear that that's working. And next, I would like to turn to our representative from FDNY, please.
Good evening, everybody. How you doing?
Good evening. Welcome.
How's everybody doing? So first thing that I'd like to discuss is our key fob program. The key fob program is actually working. We redistributed, working in partnership with New York City Housing. We redistributed all new key fobs to all units last year. The program is definitely working because we're seeing requests for new keys. So units are maintaining current adequate amount of key fobs at all times. So that's not an issue. As far as other things on our agenda, so we have been also the FDNY in conjunction with New York City Housing has worked on some of the damages that we've done to doors in particular. Like when I get the email, I pretty much know that, yeah, that's our fingerprint. We did that. So what we do is we go back in and I personally go in and look at the incident history of the response. And then I make contact with the officer to find out what had occurred. And, a lot of times it's that either the fob wasn't working or like for an elevator machinery room door, like the key had been changed due to previous break-in maybe, and we don't have that current updated key. That's as far as the keys, that's all that we have at this moment. We're going to continue to work on it, continuing to work with New York City Housing, identifying new developments that are receiving the fobs so we could be out in front of it. Another thing that I definitely think it would be important. So when there are issues in any New York City housing building, as far as like when we do our building inspection, there are basic things that we look for: stairwell labeling, the doors opening and closing properly, the door handles being there, and then the windows in the stairwells. So the other day we were just having a chat, and I actually think that what we should do moving forward is that we should, rather than come back, like, so I'll just lay it out for you. A unit goes out, does an inspection, sees that there's an issue with, say, a doorknob missing in a hallway. We fill out a piece of paper that goes through a process. It takes a very long time before that even gets to where it needs to go for it to be addressed. I think it would be in the best interest for the residents, for New York City Housing, and for the FDNY, if we could get a point of contact where if we have units that have maintenance issues with the building, they could email them to me and we could email them to a contact, still providing all the documentation that we've been doing. But then we can keep track of what's getting, on our end, what's getting done and what's not. I think those are important things. A door handle missing in a stairwell, it's very, very, very dangerous, especially in zero visibility conditions if there's a smoke condition in the hallway. Another thing I'd like to discuss is
Wait, before you get past that, you just made an excellent recommendation, and we have representatives from NYCHA on the line. And I wanted to see, what do you think of that idea if FDNY units are out in the field and they notice a safety condition like a missing door handle? Of course, they're still going to write it up and turn in the paperwork, but is there a point of contact where they could just email, right then and there, that concern? So I see that we have Chief Secreto and we have Patricia on the line. You don't have to give out someone's email and volunteer them right now, but is that something that we can commit to coordinating?
Hi, everyone. Good evening.
How you
I don't
doing?
know if I'm bypassing some established system, but I'll be that point of contact.
That would be excellent, because I would love to have the ability to keep track of it, because it's very difficult with the paper. It's just not, to be honest, it's not like I know from my experience throughout the years that it's, it could be a very long time before it gets to where it needs to go. And then it comes back down for where the repair happens, when a simple email to start a process for a missing door handle or a window. I mean, that could be the difference. That's a life safety issue. And I think that's something that we could expedite. I think it would be a great thing. And I don't know, if we had points of contacts in the 5 boroughs, or just one directly, and then we can keep track of what's getting done, like what's getting fixed.
Excellent.
So we know that
recommendation.
this is working.
Yeah,
Right,
exactly. Let's
I'll
pause
put
for a
my
minute.
information in the
Bart
chat.
weigh in, please.
Sure.
Asha, I'll put my information in the chat then.
It's okay. We can coordinate directly offline.
Okay.
If I
Perfect.
may,
Bart?
yeah, I couldn't let this opportunity pass, and it's even a better example of how the CAC has operated. But from the beginning, we heard lots of complaints from residents about damaged doors and about the FDNY, and the FDNY could not have been more responsive and responsible and helpful in trying to solve the problem. They didn't say, not us. They said, let's see what the situation is. How can we make it better? The key fob distribution. And for those who don't know, those key fobs are not only within the station houses where the NYCHA facility is, but in neighboring station houses, in case the fire department in one area is busy. And now here's an additional idea that's being added to help us improve things. So I just I didn't want to miss the opportunity to say thank you. You guys have been terrific, and Chief Secreto, thank you for joining in this. I feel comfortable knowing you would be part of it too. So it's a very nice way to to begin this meeting. Thank you.
No,
Thank
thank
you.
you. Thank you. And Michael,
Yeah.
you know, I've seen the doors broken and I've heard the complaints that, you know, people tried to present the fire department with a key and they were told, no, we're practicing, stand back, get away, get back. So I'm glad to hear that we're making strides to, you know, to get better. And,
Yeah,
you know, and I'm not
100%.
anti-FDNY. I worked for 40 years in police department, worked side by side. But I was really impressed with 60 Minutes. About 3 weeks ago, they did that piece on 9/11.
Mhm.
And man, I walked away from the TV that night with a newfound, not a newfound, but additional appreciation for what you guys do.
Thank you very much. You know what would really be helpful too? I really think that if I know the doors are very expensive, right? Like we all know how expensive the doors are, and we need to be tactically sound in gaining access to these buildings when these systems fail. So I think personally, and I know it's a bit of a reach, but I think if we were able to create, replicate maybe some of these doors so we could have them in each borough, so units could practice on an off-site door. So like instead of and again, most of the times, like, and I can tell you from my experience, we're not practicing on a door. It's the practice happens while we are actually going through the, you know, it's like it's a combination of the response and we're using it as a training tool at the same time. I think if we were able to get those doors from New York City Housing and use them as part of a training program for our department, I really think it would be amazing. And I know they're expensive, they're very expensive, but I really think it would be a very good opportunity because I have been on that fire apparatus where the key doesn't work. And you're hitting a buzzer, you're banging on a window because we don't want to go through the doors, especially the newer ones. They're not easy for us to go through conventionally. So if we were able to do that or come up with some sort of a program where we could get those doors for the FDNY so we could use them to train, that would be amazing. And I think it would benefit everybody. So I don't know. What do you guys think?
Another
think that's a
excellent
good idea.
recommendation. I'll go to Chief Secreto, please, and then Tamika, who's had her hand up.
Before you do that, I'm just going to say, we'll talk to the Capital Department at NYCHA. I mean, there are some buildings that's not immediate, but there are some buildings that are going through a comprehensive rehab, and they may be changing the doors or getting new doors in those buildings. We'll see what we can help, but because I think it's an excellent idea. Yep.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking. I know that there must be doors that are getting changed out or have been damaged. So if we could help facilitate that coordination, we can look into that. Chief Secreto, do you have thoughts there, or Patricia?
I think that's a good idea. And kind of related, we had conversations recently with the post office, and they have some program that they want to try where they have some mechanism that unlocks the doors so that, you know, the postal worker could come inside and deliver packages or whatever. So, I mean, why wouldn't the fire department be fine to benefit from something like that? Some mechanism that opens the doors throughout the NYCHA portfolio. And I hadn't thought of that before then, but the post office has it.
Chief, well, way back when, you know, I always, when these things, I actually saw these doors coming, you know, when they started. So I remember thinking to myself, as an operator, tactically, I know the fob is great, right? But the fob is a frequency, and it's anything electronic can break. And it's not always it's not always the actual fob's fault that it doesn't work. You know, we keep those fobs on us. We go to fires, we get wet, things happen, and we don't know if they work or not until we actually go to use it. So I always felt that when they design these doors, if they could have put in like a master key, like for us or whoever else, maybe New York City Housing, where we could access that door regardless of the fob, I mean, I don't think we would have to break. If you have a hard key, the likelihood of ever having to break a door is like zero, at least on our end, because we're going to go to the key every time because it's so fast. We're not breaking. If someone calls in a run for a report of fire, in apartment, 14 Adam, we are not looking to break that door down. We want to get in there. We want to get upstairs as fast as possible. So like a hard key or something where we had hardened access, I mean, it would be amazing, but I know that's not how this all started. But I know moving forward, maybe it's something that we could look at.
Okay.
Really
I'm
good
with you.
recommendations. Tamika, please, and Lilith.
Hi, yes, my question is for Alika. Alika, you mentioned some projects in the beginning, and I was just wondering if you're using the capital tracker to check on those repairs.
We use the capital tracker to track all repairs. And when we see, like say for instance, we get a report that there's like some kind of electrical problem or elevator down or some type of outage, and they explain to us it is related to a capital repair project, we'll look to see that timeline and then just kind of check on just the consistency, or if it's even up, or if the residents were notified, or if this was planned or something like that.
Tamika, did you have a follow-up question?
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. That's why you look, Tamika.
Yeah, because, I'm just wondering, I know NYCHA was saying that there's some criteria that went into the tracker, and I'm just wondering, are those funds that you're talking about, are they capital funds? Or are they operational? Like, where's the funding coming from? And can you actually see those funds on the capital tracker? Because I'm seeing a lot of things that are missing. I'm not sure how that project is set up so that it is included on the tracker. So I'm just wondering if you are checking the tracker and that information is there. It seems to be some gaps with capital projects being displayed on the capital tracker, but funding from, I don't know, elected officials that is coming through local leadership, TA leadership in the communities, and they're getting this money, it's going into NYCHA. Those things are not captured on the capital tracker. I think that's something important that we should highlight here. Just wondering if the project that you were specifically talking about were included on the tracker, and if it did fall within those parameters within NYCHA's disclaimer at the bottom of the tracker.
So one thing specifically, and we can talk offline, I guess, with the NYCHA team, if there are some gaps in different things, but from what we look at, or just what we looked at last week, the only thing that didn't line up was like the timeline where the project should be completed within like the next 10 days. And we're like, it should be, right? And so we have to look to see if it is in the next couple of weeks, but things like that. But are we looking to compare it to everything that NYCHA is working on and all of the capital repair needs? I have not looked at it with that lens. That doesn't mean that HUD hasn't looked at it, and it doesn't mean that HUD is not working with those who were first piloting the capital project tracker. But I just made mention of it because it's something that, just looking at this particular group, this CAC, that's something that we asked for in the past and that we can see now. I don't know how exhaustive it is. I don't know, how, if it's 100% accurate or if there's projects missing. I'm sure there are projects missing, but we can speak to what that is, and maybe somebody could, from the group can work on that again. but it was helpful in what we looked at last week. And we'll see if the project is completed
Well,
according to the timeline.
that's good. And I'm glad you highlighted the capital tracker because it's an initiative that was, born here out of the CAC and out of these discussions and the great ideas that, started from you, looking at the elected official funding and wondering, where is the transparency to see it? And then highlighted by the resident leaders that they know that money has been allocated from city officials and varying funding sources, and then wanting to be able to see where's the money, what's the status of the project. So we're really glad to see that NYCHA has taken the initiative and started that project. I understand it's still in the beta testing phase. So I encourage everyone on this call, everyone watching, please go test it out and give feedback while they still are developing it, so that if there are gaps or kinks in the system, that they could be worked out. I don't know if a representative from NYCHA knows how long the window will be open on the beta testing phase, but if you could let us know, because I do know that we have some recommendations as we've tried it out. But before we continue on that, I wanted to get to Ms. Lozano, who's had her hand up. Please proceed.
Good evening, everybody. It's always a pleasure to be in these meetings. I was listening to the dialogue between both of the gentlemen. One of the things that we've been still awaiting with HUD, we discussed it with HUD a couple of years back, and with safety and security, we're still awaiting the survey that safety and security said they were gonna complete with the interior and the exterior of all the developments. That never came to fruition. As far as the fire department, we've had so much vandalism because they haven't been able to get easy access. I don't know where the idea came from with the electronic. It's very costly. The doors are not disabled friendly. I think we need to revisit that and have like a prototype to see what does work. Just because something works in one borough doesn't mean that it's going to work on another one. I'm still waiting for Mr. Schwartz so we could decide to go to all 5 boroughs to discuss safety and security, to work with the fire department as well as NYPD. So with that being said, maybe as a recommendation, we need to go back to the fundamentals, because I know a lot of residents, especially seniors, cannot afford $25 to replace those key, what do they call again? Keys? I don't even know. I just know they don't work. The doors, we got private vendors having to come to developments to fix those horrible doors from $3,000 to $5,000 a pop, weekly, daily, monthly. And if we want to cut costs, that's something that's vandalism preventative, and that the fire department, because even with the precincts, they say when the officers leave, we can't replace those keys. That's another problem with the fire department. That's another problem with all these other ones. So with that being said, I just want to put it out there, and Bart offline, please let me know about when we're going to meet in all 5 boroughs. Okay, I yield the floor.
Thank you, Ms. Lozano.
Yes, I will. I will do that.
Yeah, and it sounds like that would be the perfect thing to coordinate with Chief Secreto as well. If you guys are planning that, I keep volunteering you, Chief Secreto. Thank you for being on the call. But that sounds like an important thing. Do you have an update on the surveys that Ms. Lozano was referring to?
Is that a question for me?
Chief, yeah, maybe I can help.
Yeah.
But this goes back to a hearing that the city council held probably a couple of years ago.
June of 2019.
June of 2019.
I was in high school.
Nice try.
Where I'm want to be as careful as I can. My recollection is that those in charge of security said that they had surveys done and that they would deliver them promptly to the city council. So it's now closing in the end of 2022. They never delivered anything at any time. And I don't think they exist. So I think the burden would be to start doing that, or see if that's how to do it the right way. I don't think you're going to find anything in the file cabinets that gives you a head start.
But I just made 1 year and today is 1 year and 7 days. It's the first time I'm hearing of this survey. So
well, I'm not surprised because I don't think there was anything to hear about. But it is obviously it's a serious issue because people were asking how do you safeguard, what do you plan for, and that's the purpose of we all know, for a risk assessment of this kind. Any way we can be helpful with that. I didn't want you to think that there was something that you missed. I don't think it was ever done. Dan, you got the date exactly because you and I have talked about this a number of times.
Yep.
About how to try to get this going. So we could.
And I don't know if Secreto and Secreto, I don't know if you remember, but remember when we had those the serial killer in Woodside houses in Brownsville?
Sure.
yes.
Yeah, and so we did an emergency hearing and then included full out safety and security topic and conversation.
Was that your hearing that they made those representations?
Excuse me, it was in 2019. And when we spoke, when CCOP spoke to Honan at the time, there was a whole, all of them are not, none of them are there. Rodriguez, we're talking about backtracking. When prior to the pandemic, we were reassured by safety and security that because of the severity with the scaffolding and the drug activity and all these other criminal elements occurring in all 5 boroughs, they had told us to give them, Cirillo had informed us to give them at least 30 days to 60 to make that assessment on the survey. So it's crucial. I think that we shouldn't have any more executive decisions. I think with cutting the costs, especially with HUD and Olika being there, Olika, I don't want to put you out there, but I know who you are and I know what you do, and I'm just relying on you to get HUD to re-investigate on getting better doors and prototypes so they could present it to NYCHA. That'll be cost effective but has a durability, and it'll help all the agencies, all the emergency responders as we need now that we're dealing with a different climate of violence in our communities.
So important. Thank you so much for that.
When the HUD agreement was negotiated, safety and security was not a big subject at the time. And so it's become part of the activities that we're doing. There's no pillar for safety and security, but safety and security impacts many of the pillars, and of course, costs a lot of money. Just as we're talking about repair of the doors and so forth. So we've gotten involved with safety and security, although it's not set out as a particular pillar in the HUD agreement. And frankly, there was some resistance to that at the beginning from NYCHA, but then I think they saw pretty quickly that situations were getting worse and that we ought to be working together on that as much as possible, which we're doing.
Thank you, Bart. And now to turn to Ms. Samantha Rogers from NYCHA, and then Mr. Hall, resident leader.
Hi, everyone. Good evening. So I just wanted to ask a question about the survey or, and make a suggestion as well. 2019 also predates myself at NYCHA. But in regard to a survey, what I do know is that we are gearing up for the annual resident survey, and maybe these security questions can be included in that resident survey that is going to go out to all residents. And so that's a way to, answer that, I'm guessing, if anyone has any familiarity with what the questions were. They're 100% relative to what is going on. And, anywhere from 15,000 to 18,000 NYCHA residents participate in that survey. And so if you need a data set, that would be a good way to get it in regard to that.
Yeah, I might add to that, NYCHA set up the resident roundtable. And a major part of what that roundtable is doing, what NYCHA is focusing on, is safety and security. So, I mean, they've certainly got their eye on the ball and recognize it as an issue. The last I heard, I think there was something like 75 recommendations that came out of the roundtable. They were reorganized into about 45 or 46. And that's what I think NYCHA is focusing on. They recognize the need, and that's what they made safety and security a big part of the roundtable.
Well, Bart, you preempted Samantha's update. She's here precisely for that reason, to give an update on the important work that the Resident Roundtable is doing. So I'm glad that you touched on it. And Samantha, maybe you take this moment to give that more fulsome update, please.
And my apologies.
Yeah, no, it's fine. It's funny you said that, because so Roundtable, one of their main focuses for last year in Roundtable was safety and security, and then again, right, in this second year, in this second iteration, safety and security is paramount as well. And yes, there are 46 recommendations that came out of that first year. And out of that 46 recommendations, I want to say there's about 6 or 7 that are solely based on safety and security. And then we added in like flood resiliency and safety and preparedness as well, now that we're, facing hurricane season. So that is one of the main focuses of Roundtable, along with then quality of life, resident satisfaction. So we're it's quality of life kind of, quality assurance kind of in one, where we're going to focus on resident satisfaction as well. And then also we're going to touch on mental health and its relation to safety and security as well. So that's our next focus in Roundtable. The Roundtable is fully staffed, if you will. We are back up to 32 residents on that Roundtable. And so we will be introducing now to this fully staffed Roundtable next Thursday on the 20th, when we meet, what their 4 areas of focus will be again for this year. And again, with safety and security kind of being paramount. So that's my update for Roundtable. Family days, we did host several family days this year throughout the summer. We do have about 4 left to host from now through the end of December. One thing that we did notice, though, with family days this year is that if NYPD did not have enough staff to cover, then family days were asked to either be rescheduled or be contained, where a development may be used to having a broader reach and more families come out. And some developments were told that maybe only the TA could do something small and maybe not all residents, because the NYPD could not staff it. So I know that in regard to family days, and safety and security again, and the partnership with NYPD, I know that that is in the plan for next year, and starting to speak a little bit earlier about, that plan going forward for family days. And then my last update is about elections. Yes, we held elections from January all throughout the summer. A lot of new faces in tenant association leadership. So that's exciting as well, bringing everyone on board. A new CCOP also. And then we also have more elections rounding out the end of the year. So in October, between this week and next week, we are holding general meetings. And then next month in November, I think November 15th through 17th, in all 5 boroughs, we're doing nomination meetings. And then depending on those nomination meetings, then some will then go into election in December. And the same thing about December 17th, 18th, 19th or so, elections will be held where we need to hold elections. And so that's the update from resident engagement, which is now Resident Participation and Civic Engagement Services Department.
Thank you so much for being here to represent that department and for your leadership on the resident roundtable, which I've had the opportunity to observe. And there are many, many great recommendations that we hope that NYCHA will implement. Before we move on, I want to give the floor to Mr. Hall, who's had his hand up, and then Chief Thompson, please.
Well, good evening, everyone. I don't really want to be redundant, but I have to make this clear. All right. First of all, the tracking device that was mentioned earlier, I'm so glad Ms. Tamika Moore mentioned that. All right. I need some clarification on that. So I hope presidents are going to be educated on that particular process, especially when it lends itself to city council funding. And I'm glad Chief Secreto is on, because I want to make it known that my development, Gun Hill Houses, has received $675,000 for cameras. And I have to make it known because NYCHA has not given me any transparency to this point. So that being said, I just want you to know from a public safety standpoint of view, when that comes up, please feel free to address the best needs of my particular development. Another thing that was mentioned was the locks with the fire department and Chief Secreto. It's very good.
Hold on a second, Mr. Hall, before you leave that point, yeah. I really did want to underscore it because after you and I spoke, I did look at the Capitol Tracker to see if I saw anything about Gun Hill's lighting project specifically, and it was not listed yet. I know that the funding was allocated in around the summer, and the announcement was made at your family day, but I don't see it yet. And I'm wondering if part of the problem is that, as funding makes its way from, city council through the process to get to NYCHA, if there's a way to kind of track where there is in the process as well. And then your situation caused us to kind of look at the fine print of the tracker and the exclusions that Ms. Moore was mentioning, and a lot of projects aren't there that would be of interest to the resident association leaders that pertain precisely to the development. So one of our recommendations as they continue with the beta test is that they do both of those things, talk about the funding sources that are on the way and talk about some of the additional projects beyond the more traditional quote capital projects.
That would be great. That would be great because, and you can utilize this particular situation as how to track or when things come forward, because we have to have some type of timeline, and I understand that. So that being said, we as presidents just don't want to lose what we set out to achieve. And
right.
Yeah, as was previously mentioned, you turn around and the next thing you know, there's a new president. And the development
Yes,
has no idea as to what they are supposed to be receiving. So that being said, I just want to offset what has happened many times in the past in order to kind of personally upgrade the direction of NYCHA and transparency, because I am a keen.
And you make another good point about training. Like, yes, we know about the tracker because we talked about it here in the CAC, but do other people, do the resident leaders really know? Have they been trained on it? Do they know how it works and what it can tell them, or when to check, or when to advocate that something's not there, and so forth and so on. So the beauty of the roundtable, we have resident engagement on to, put on your list that might be something to coordinate as it rolls out of beta phase, to make sure that the resident leaders know about it and are trained accordingly. You make a good point, Mr. Hall. And then I know you had a point that you wanted to address to FDNY.
Oh, yes. No, when you mentioned the doorknobs, that was very good, because that's a pragmatic problem. All right. That offset the drug trade, because they used to put the doorknobs off to handle distributions. And that's why a lot of problems occurred. So if in fact FDNY has a source that they can report these outages to, it'll be quite beneficial. So other than that, I'm very happy that situation even came about. And other than that, I yield the floor.
Thank you. That's an important question. I see hands up from both Samantha and Michael Thompson. I don't know if those are old hands or if you have new comments, but please proceed.
I'd never lowered my hand. I don't have another question. Thank you.
Okay.
So while we're on the topic of safety, I'm pretty sure everyone's aware of the e-bike, electronic lithium-ion bike fires that have been happening nonstop throughout New York City. I think while we're on this topic of safety, I really think, does New York City Housing, I'm not aware of any, do they have any provisions as far as storing e-bikes in apartments? Are there any, I'm just looking for some feedback, because I would like to make a recommendation if I could.
I'll look to the representatives of NYCHA, and I know that a council member of ES has also been working on this issue.
Yeah, I mean, if the councilwoman wants to go, I'll go first, or you could go first. NYCHA has not established a policy about the e-bikes or gas-powered bikes. However, we have been bringing them in under the auspices of it occupies public spaces in the hallways, outside, chained to a fence. So we have, and in speaking to the police department, we've recovered upwards of 600 of such bikes and in the developments and on the grounds. What I would like to see us do is come out with a policy, but I guess it's controversial in that you may have people that use these bikes to make deliveries, as that's their their lifeblood. So it would look bad that we're coming out with that policy. But on the other hand, there's 3 deaths in the last year or so in NYCHA, and that's not to count deaths that happen in fires outside of NYCHA. So it's definitely a dangerous condition. One of the things that I thought about, and I don't know if we'll ever see this happen, is if they could put some type of charging device outside, like city bike racks, where people could charge their bikes and then not bring them into the buildings or chain them to a fence or whatever.
Yeah, I think that would be, I think that would be a home run. I think though, like since this is the movement, right? This is the way things are going. You see more and more people with the bikes. I get it. Like I totally understand, but I think it would really be important if people are people are going to store bikes in their apartments. Maybe we could create an education program as far as how to properly store your bike, signs and things to look at. Like I can tell you from experience from a fire I was at recently, where a lot of times the bikes are stored right at the front door, just because of the design and the layout of the apartments. It's the best place, right? You don't want to have to bring the bike all the way to and from, you know, your back room or whatever it may be. That's problematic. If that bike goes on fire, there's no way to get out. So I think maybe moving forward, and again, it's not really, we could work together, trying to create some sort of messaging, a pamphlet, just something so we can educate those on proper storage, proper charging, where to put the bikes, where not to maybe put the bikes. It's just something that I feel like we're seeing more and more of. And it's just, there's nothing we can do about it. I just feel like if we could help one person, that would make me feel a lot better.
Absolutely. Council member?
Yes, hello, good afternoon, everyone, or good evening. How's everybody doing? I'm Councilmember Alexa Viles. I was going to say Councilmember Alika Embry-Samuel's predecessor as chair of the Public Housing Committee. And I guess I'll just quickly mention, NYCHA did propose, put out a proposal for rule change, open for public comment, right? That would change, people would actually ban e-bikes on the campuses. There was a lot of discussion. I think, to NYCHA's credit, really kind of listened to multiple perspectives. There is a real safety issue, as you mentioned, and this is a citywide issue for sure, because in my district, I've had fires in residences that have displaced hundreds of people per building. Thankfully, no deaths in that situation, but one death is too many. So, I think NYCHA really did a good job at listening to multiple perspectives around it. This whole industry is quite a mystery. In fact, it's highly unregulated. And what we're seeing is we have no idea where the batteries are being manufactured, how and where they're being sold, the quality. So we have learned quite a lot, that there is a lot that the city has to do. And clearly this, using micromobility devices, e-bikes are way, way further ahead, right? There are thousands of New Yorkers that are using them and will continue to use them. They're both economical, they're good for work. They're, in many circumstances, a better alternative to some mass transit. They're a green alternative. And also there are quite a lot of NYCHA residents who really just enjoy it, and they should have the liberty to enjoy what they need to do. So there's definitely, so the rule did not get pushed forward. I think NYCHA did receive quite a lot of feedback and wants to be more nuanced about it. I think you're right, Mr. Thompson, about this pursuit of charging stations that are outside of the buildings, right? That people could securely put their bikes in. Other countries have it. Other cities are looking into it. The city council is looking at a host of legislation, but again, trying to be comprehensive and understanding. The fact of the matter is that the batteries that we see that are causing these fires are often secondhand batteries. And they're kind of refurbished batteries. And so what happens is delivery workers, who are probably the major users of e-bikes at this point, are buying cheaper product, right? Because they're still very expensive devices to maintain. They're getting crappy product. And as a result, very little education coming from the manufacturers, little education coming from the retailers. So there's definitely a push for an education campaign on NYCHA campuses to let folks know how to charge those batteries, what they shouldn't be doing. Ideally, across the city, we should be figuring out how to include charging stations. We've been developing car charging stations. We should figure out how can we also plug in bikes to those stations, because this is really a citywide issue. There's also a question around disposal and what to do with these batteries that are disposed of. And I guess lastly, I didn't realize I'd be becoming an expert on e-bike and lithium ion batteries, but there's also, there are no national standards for the batteries. What is being sold is really like all over the place. The batteries that are being used for a city bike, let's say, are the most expensive batteries that are only used for recreational usage. The vast majority of the batteries that are used out there are for work. So they're more substantial batteries, which is why you see they can, the fires are pretty significant. So we want to do education. We've got to figure out, this is a federal, state, and local issue, because we need to regulate this industry. We need to set some real standards and understand that we've got to find ways that the cost doesn't totally get placed onto the end users, but that the industry is a responsible one. We've got to figure out how to dispose of them, because we're seeing them in the waste stream, and they also set fires in sanitation trucks and in facilities that are processing the waste, which is also very dangerous for the workers there. So there's quite a lot to do on this, and we want to continue to urge NYCHA to look comprehensively and maybe how to do a pilot of establishing charging stations in maybe one or two of the campuses to see how that works out, right, on protected space, in addition to educating. And we have to do that all and work very closely with the fire department, who's been a really great partner in trying to figure out how we address this comprehensively. Just doing an outright ban is not going to address the situation. It's just going to make people still bring their stuff into their apartment and hide it. We just see that it's increasing every single day in usage, and that's just the way the industry is going. So we have to kind of get with the program and look at it comprehensively, and really address the fire issue. I mean, again, one life is way too many. So I'm intrigued by certainly the security audit that was maybe supposed to be done in 2019. That clearly is outstanding, but this is very much a situation of what does a comprehensive security audit of a building look like? Because we see, everything from scaffolding to the potential of these fires and what are exits. And in the case of Red Hook, where it's under resiliency, there's so much scaffolding and gates, you can't even get to the buildings if you wanted to pull up a fire truck near the building. So I don't even know how that would work itself out. Thank God I haven't had that experience. So I'm very interested in that. But let me I'm rambling a lot. So shall I stop and maybe give my quick report back?
Yeah, if you could. Thank you so much for sharing the insight and all of the information you've learned and educated us all on with regards to the e-bikes, because it's, as you said, it's the wave of the future. There's so many pluses, but the fire hazard is certainly something of major concern.
Yeah.
Before we move on, Chief Thompson, did you have something you wanted to weigh in on that? Okay. I saw the virtual.
No, I'm good. I just to your point, I just think if we could maybe just do a very small education, hand out pamphlets under every door, just so one person reads it, they may recognize the signs and symptoms of a bad battery, or, hey, maybe I won't put it near my door. Maybe I'll charge it somewhere else. It's just something. I mean, I just think.
And I know this is a citywide concern. Is FDNY, and I know you guys have a really great education department. Is this something that you're already putting together that NYCHA can then make sure it gets thoroughly distributed?
So I'm in operations. I could reach out to. We do have subject matter experts on the lithium ion batteries and e-bikes and all the different types. We do have subject matter experts. I could reach out to both of them and get back to you on maybe some ideas that could definitely help. We have a fire safety education, and maybe coordinating those individuals with myself and NYCHA, we could come up with something beneficial. But that's
so you guys have flyers that we've used in our development and our talks, about the batteries. It really is a question of manpower, right? Because you can put the flyers everywhere, but if you don't have conversations with folks, a lot of that is like kind of for naught. So this really is a question of how do we engage in the conversation, get the word out, you know, by media on all different forms, right? In the news, not just in this hysterical, like, you know, people die sense, but like in a serious way, how people can care for each other and how to deal with these devices that are not going away. So there's a lot of work to be done there on behalf of the city for sure, in partnership with FDNY.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. And then just while we're on this topic and while we're making solutions, Chief Secreto and Patricia, I'll look to you all to just, again, volunteer coordinator with Chief Thompson and I think he's going to coordinate with the fire safety and education side. So we will coordinate offline to make sure that partnership continues to come to fruition. Excellent. Art, did you
I have
want to
a
weigh
question
in?
about the e-bikes. Could I ask a quick question about the e-bikes?
Yes.
Wouldn't it be more prudent to legislate the standards of the batteries itself instead of, you know, attacking the people, the end user? Because the end user doesn't have the response. They don't have the expert knowledge of
Yes.
what they're buying. And so I think legislation in that regard to the responsibility of the corporation selling it would be more fruitful.
Yes, as always, Mr. Martinez, you're spot on. You know, again, because of the different jurisdictional issues, you know, the city council couldn't legislate a federal issue or a state issue. And so there are some jurisdictional issues in terms of, you know, the manufacturing sector and all that. So we're looking and trying to parse that out, but we need each level of government to take a hand in figuring out what aspect of the sector they can regulate. As opposed to, you know, the city, we're closest to kind of the people on the ground, we're closest to the end users and to, let's say, the corporations like DoorDash, right? That really incentivize the use of e-bikes because that's their business model. So, you know, I think we're trying to figure out, slow down the mechanism that would impact, honestly, the end user first and not in a positive way and go exactly to where you're going. So we're trying to pull it back a little bit, but we have to get federal and state level partners because a lot of the regulatory elements are happen at that level. So we're preempted from a whole lot of it. But the city is looking at, there's a lot of council member education around standards, around making the restaurants, you know, also engage in education with their workers who are using these e-bikes. You know, there's also mopeds, or I call them mopeds, but they're, you know, they're also an undefined category of at the state level. So like they're being sold these things for work purposes, and yet they're actually illegal, but they can be purchased and then they get confiscated by the cops because there's no category for them. So it's a little bit of a morass that we need a lot of coordination at those levels. And you're right, we want to go to the manufacturers and get it done that way. But, you know, I think we're still trying to figure out at multiple levels how to address it because the safety concerns are real and we can't let that, you know, we can't let that sit to the wayside. So we've kind of got to do everything. So I would be happy to.
Lozano, I'm going to ask you to, excuse me for interrupting. Ms. Lozano, I'll ask you to hold your hand for a moment, and then council member, I'm going to ask you to please give us your more fulsome update.
I'm going to do a lightning round update and would be happy to talk to you all after this or, you know, offline, whatever is helpful. So we've had just a quick update, a couple of hearings. As of most recent, this month, we had actually last month, September 23rd, we had a hearing on oversight hearing on water testing at Reese, obviously a huge issue. I know the monitor is also looking into it. We've gotten a lot of information. Obviously, NYCHA has put forward They're doing a lot of retesting, a lot of outreach and conversations with the community, particularly at Reese. I think, you know, it kind of was another example of that demonstrated some of serious problem areas, right? And contracts and education, and what was the outreach, and what was the emergency response, and certainly what's the post, how do you address this kind of issue afterwards. So, you know, that hearing was pretty robust and garnered a lot of information that we're actually still culling through. The residents, they continue to get their water tested. So far it's come up negative, excuse me. But there's a lot of trust to be rebuilt around that situation. There was an enormous amount of harm done that cannot be denied, and residents that are still second guessing whether their water is safe. So that's going to take a long time. And there are other residents that didn't have the direct impact of Reese itself, but are starting to wonder, is my water safe? Like, can I trust what is being said when they give it a clear report? So those are all things we need to continue to contend with around communication and resident engagement. And I guess before I go to that, we also
Sorry,
had
before you move on, on the Reese hearing, and I was so glad that it happened because it was so important and so many important issues, and again, so many lingering concerns. And Bart, I know you wanted to weigh in on the monitor's work as it relates to Reese. If you could, please.
No, I think I did in the last, in the community meeting that we had, and council members, correct, we are working with the Department of Investigation doing a joint inquiry, and there are a lot of issues, communications and the like, and that's what we'll be looking at, and have already started.
Thank you. Council member, please continue.
Yeah, so then on, I guess, a few days earlier than that, on September 20th, we had an oversight hearing on contracts. You know, I think here was really exploring the scope of contracting at NYCHA, the oversight of those contracts, lack of oversight, you know, bad actors. What is accessibility? Just because you can see a list of contracts on a website, does that make that information actually usable for residents? So we kind of went into the whole host of that, including on a very light level, some questions around Section 3 and employment practices, but truthfully, that needs its own hearing and space because it is a robust area and there's so much to talk about there. You know, I think, again, what we see is real challenges around accountability. And really looking at, you know, loopholes around contractors and subcontractors, right? This is what we saw at Reese. They subcontracted out a body of work to an entity that actually had no New York certifications to actually do that work. So this is a huge problem in the contracting process is, you know, subcontractors run amok. Need for assessments around these and ways that bring residents, you know, quality work and just, you know, important feedback mechanisms. So there's, again, a lot of information we're actually waiting to hear back from NYCHA so that we can then circle back and look at how can we get some more redress and change our process and practice to address contracting issues, which are really quite significant, billions of dollars in contracts going out the door. And NYCHA is rebuilding or building its process around it, trying to rebuild a more robust structure to manage those contracts. You know, we see it most egregiously. Well, where it's trying to rebuild is around capital, right? Where those contracts are so significant. NYCHA is trying to, you know, I think, build an apparatus that can actually sustain and properly manage those contracts, but it's not there yet. So a lot to still be explored there. The next hearing that's coming up on actually October 19th is around resident engagement. And here, the impetus for this hearing really has been a kind of a triad of questions, right? Resident engagement as it pertains to obviously just repairs and operations of NYCHA, right? What that looks like. Resident engagement as it pertains to the TAs, resident engagement as it pertains to elections. I will say I have had firsthand experience of resident engagement in all those three areas. And I will sadly say I did not have a very good experience. And I hear from residents across New York City who also echo the challenges, everything from lack of language access of basic information to actually, elections that were obtuse and unclear, where there were all these voting ways and no one understood what it was, training where there was no facilitation of dialogue, even explaining to residents what it meant to be part of a TA, what the structure was. So we really want to get into what is the infrastructure at NYCHA around resident engagement, how the staff is trained around facilitating conversations, because resident engagement is really beyond a robocall and a flyer in the hallway. So those are the things we want to really kind of dive into and get we have a lot of residents who want to come in. Obviously, there have been a ton of elections that have happened over the last year. And, there has been a lot of contested elections, including the CAC election, which we know many people have posed real significant questions about. So I think this is a really important conversation, particularly in the guise of the trust, right? Where residents will be given the opportunity to make a choice around what they would like to see in their developments. And quite frankly, NYCHA's 7% turnout in a typical TA election is wholly insufficient, both on a regular practical level in general, but would not be okay for the kinds of decisions like the trust and other things that it needs to be held to a higher standard. So NYCHA is in the process of developing a proposal for a draft rule on what the voting will be, what the voting is going to look like for the trust. And it only has given itself a month-long open process for residents to comment. I think it's an unfortunate disservice. I made that statement to NYCHA leadership that 1 month around such an important thing is just not enough time. However, I think they were, I think they were, locked in, I think, because of legislative purposes and milestones they had to meet. So there wasn't a lot of wiggle room within that. I think it was something that folks did it and then said, oh shit, we don't have time to really do this in a robust way. Quite frankly, I think we're going to see a lot of the same, right? The same responses of, you rush things, you don't give us enough time, and it feels like more of the same process. So we'll see. But that's going to be, the hearing will be on the 19th. I invite you all, happy to have offline, online conversations. Feel free to, come in and talk, invite more residents to please participate. The more voices, the better. The end point always is not for it to be a crap session. We want to really move to try to find solutions, very much like we are doing here at the CAC, is to figure out how we can make sure that things are better for the residents and that we honestly, meet a higher standard. Because my expectation, like you all, right, is that we produce the best quality that we can for what our residents deserve. So I think that's it. I probably talked way too much.
Thank you so much for your leadership and these very important hearings you've been holding. We look forward to seeing the resident engagement hearing on October 19th. We will certainly be tuning in for that. As you know, the very purpose of the CAC and this arm of the monitorship is for outreach to residents. And based on all that we hear from that outreach, we bring those concerns back to the CAC to figure out solutions. And so we're so glad to hear you give these updates here today. And I'm wondering, you mentioned Section 3 and other Section 9 concerns, and that's of course paramount for residents. And I'm wondering if there will be a hearing planned for that.
We certainly should. I can't tell you. Our hearings have been really informed by the residents, and certainly Section 3 is something. I just don't remember kind of what our next queue of hearings will be. So I suspect definitely Section 3 will be on there in a more focused way. I feel like it kind of got tacked into the contracts. I'm not quite sure how, but I think it really does deserve a separate space. And it's also something that I think the comptroller is also kind of looking into. But yeah, there's quite a long list of things that residents are really interested, certainly an audit of NYCHA, really understand, and even, TPA funds and all these different things.
Absolutely.
So I'd be happy to report back to the CAC on what
great.
our list of things that we've been kicking around with residents looks like for the next couple of months.
That'd be great. Related to that, I know a lot of the issues that Manny wanted to bring up dovetail really well with the topics you were just focusing on, particularly as it relates to contractor accountability and also Section 9 concerns, including Section 3. So Manny, I'll give you the floor, please.
Thank you, Ms. Muldrow, and thank you, Councilmember Aviles, for an in-depth report, especially because it does tie into, as Ms. Muldrow said, into this discussion that I wanted to present in regards to Section 9. Right, Section 9 is an investment into the people, whereas Section 8 is corporate welfare. When you're looking at project-based vouchers, and then when you're looking at the resident engagement part of it, the services. This is in Section 9. We have services. We're supposed to have access to services such as Section 3, which encompasses employment, training, and contracting. And when you look at the number, when you look at the dollar amount value here in New York City is different than every other housing agency for the simple fact that the money that's coming into here would make Section 3 work phenomenally. We're talking about $8 billion potentially $8 billion in contracts that triggers Section 3, that would trigger training, which is not happening, what would trigger contracting, which is not happening. I've looked at HUD reports, so I've looked at NYCHA's reports to HUD in which they submitted 0% subcontracting on their contracts, even though on Part 135, there's a benchmark of 10%, right? You also have to look at resident businesses under Part 963, in which the Public Housing Agency is responsible to contracting up to $1 million with a contractor, with a resident business, which is significant. This is not things that you find in Section 8. These are investments into the people. When you look at Section 5H to the Housing Act, which is a home ownership program for both houses and public housing units, and the fact that NYCHA right now has 130 FHA homes that are boarded up, and they have over 5,000 flat rent residents who are then not offering equity opportunities with home ownership of those FHA homes, right? And then you also have the over income limit, which is also a testament to why this is an investment into the people. So you have 120% AMI coverage versus the 80% AMI under Section 8. And this is so that you can reach that equity, so that you can have that extra to put up, so you could put that down payment down, or you can invest into your business and get into that $1 million contracting, whatever it is. This is an investment to the people. If you invested this way into the people without this obstruction, NYCHA would not be in this problem because rent would be up. If we look at the fact that 50%, prior years, 2019, 50% of rent was being collected, and it still totaled $1 billion. And the average rent was just under $600. If we were to invest in the people in the way it was supposed to be, the average rent would probably rise up to $2,500. And in rent alone, we would have enough money to make sure that this would be a viable and quality housing. And the last thing that we have, no, not the last thing, another thing we have to look at is Part 964. And Section 9 itself is a civil rights era legislation. It was amended in 1969 to include all of these factors, including the democratic representation of the resident councils or tenant associations that are very vital into our quality of life. Because if it wasn't for our tenant associations, a lot of folks would still be struggling with pests and would still be struggling with mold and lead and a host of other issues. I have a computer list in here of hundreds of people and hundreds of families that I've helped, right, across this, nonetheless. And then lastly, Resident Management Corporation, which is significant because that's an opportunity for us to redistribute federal funds into our community. And resident management is something that has been around since the 70s. It was called tenant management, and then it got revised in 1994 to resident management. And lastly, and this is the real lastly, the Resident Advisory Board, where we get to put input into the 5-year plan for the Housing Authority. Now, all of the things that I've mentioned here in New York City, which should be thriving, all of them are being obstructed. None of these programs are being accessible, and everyone considers Section 9 in a similar way of Section 8 of just being 30% of your household income. This is the huge problem of what's happening in New York City now. This is why we are underfunded, because Section 9 is supposed to have a return on investment. And we're not seeing that return because the people are not being, it's not reaching the people the way it's intended, the way it was legislated by both the writ and the spirit of the law. And then we also have to look at the safety of contractors and how they're engaging our resident spaces in which they are closing off areas, staging areas, and construction areas, and leaving them open for people, for trespassers to come in and harbor and hide and conquer and to move into these spaces, which endangers our communities. My senior, an abandoned senior center on my development was just commandeered and turned into a dope den, a heroin den, right? Where they put up blankets. I had the architects come in because we started to get funding for it. And the architects, when we opened up the door, they opened it up to blankets all around the entryway and tables, and they just set up. It's crazy, right? And I'm gonna digress from that because that's just maddening. But we have to impose stronger restrictions or stronger expectations on these contractors and the safety of our communities. They have to be able to, they must know that they have to build bigger defenses, and they have to have sturdier locks. They have to have enclosures that will protect the areas and keep people from sleeping and doing all kinds of activities in this area where we have children and seniors and working families trying to go in and out of their community. I've had a senior attacked by one of the trespassers. I've had 3 overdoses in my development in the same buildings, where you have little children seeing bloody basement walls and black bags coming out of the basement. This is not what is supposed to be intended. This is a problem. And then lastly, well, what time is it? 1 more minute. Legislation. How is it that the New York City Housing Authority got legislation for the Preservation Trust? When you look at the state legislation, it says specifically at the request of the New York City Housing Authority. How are they lobbying for legislation, but they can't lobby for legislation on e-bikes, and they can't lobby for legislation to reduce trespasses or to modify architectural deficiencies in our buildings that's allowing these things to happen? Why are they're able to do that, but they're not able to do the other things for the responsibilities that they have of maintaining quality housing for the 500,000 people that live here? And with that, I digress. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Martinez. You hit on so many important points. The importance of the investment in the residents that Section 9 calls for in so many different ways. It's critical. So I'm so glad you highlighted that. The importance of contractor accountability and even the safety concerns that they create. I'm glad you highlighted that. And most importantly, and we've talked about it today, just the importance of legislation and lobbying that will ultimately be a benefit to the residents. So thank you as always for that insightful comments. I want to turn to the Deputy Monitor, Dan Brownell, to give an update on the work the monitor's been doing in the most recent quarterly report, and then we will close out our meeting.
So, Asha, if I can, I'd like to propose something, and then I'll talk about heating in a second. So it seems to me, given the conversation we've had tonight, and this is, this is a great committee, that one of the things we can certainly do is to come up with what we see as the necessary components for every development safety plan. I know Fred, who's on this call, Fred Baldino and Chris Fasano, who former NYPD lieutenants who are on the monitor team, have also been looking and asking questions in terms of where these so-called safety plans are, and we haven't been able to find any either. And of course, we heard what Chief Secreto said, that he hasn't seen these things. So fine, there aren't any. So there's no reason why we can't create them. And as I said, between the fire department and Michael Thompson and Samantha and resident engagement, because I can't remember the new title of that department you now run, and of course, Chief Secreto and other people, as I said, it seems to me as a first step, we can certainly come up with our recommendations in terms of what every development safety plan should contain. And then from there, just keep pushing to actually make them a reality. And again, I don't run the CAC, Asha, you do, and Bart does, but I don't see why in December we can't put, at our next meeting, kind of show it to everybody and put our proposal out and really get this thing going. So that's all I'm going to say about
I
it.
love that idea. And what I love most about this CAC committee is that everybody just rolls up their sleeves and gets to work. So you heard it from Dan. We'll be calling you all to have a subcommittee to get to work on recommendations as it relates to this. And I think that same group can coordinate as it relates to the other safety issues we discussed, particularly around the fire safety issues and so forth.
Yeah.
So that's a great recommendation.
We can create templates.
Right.
For different situations, different kinds of developments. Remember, there's low rise, middle, high, but we could create templates working with the chief that can be used after we're gone. At some point there's got to be an end to monitorship, and NYCHA's got to do it on its own.
Good.
Right.
Okay, then we will definitely get that started.
Excellent recommendation. We had so many great recommendations tonight, which we are noting, recording, sharing on the live stream so that we will roll up our sleeves to get to work on them. I know NYCHA's on the line, hopefully taking good notes as well. We'll coordinate with you for follow-up and continue to follow up on the other initiatives that have come out of the CAC so that we can make them robust and sustainable and just continue to use this as a vehicle to at least make, the small changes that we can along the way. Right. There's so much work to be done. So right. I thank everyone for their continued commitment. Thank you for your contributions tonight and all of your hard work always. We are scheduling our next CAC meeting for December 6th. So please save the date and we will look to see you then. And I will turn it to Bart to close us out, please.
Oh, thank you. I think there are some new people from NYCHA who are on this call, and I'm really glad because they saw an excellent example of how it functions, and over the different in some of the meetings we've had many more agencies respond. It's actually been a roundtable for agencies to work on things together. This one was narrower, which was fine because we needed to talk about more narrow issues. So I look forward to us continuing this. It's kind of interesting that, and I know I've said this before, but the idea of the CAC was the idea of one of the assistant U.S. attorneys, although he didn't know what it should do or who should be a part of it. So he left that up to us to figure out. And the way we approach it is to get as many voices in it as we could, including residents, of course, but also officials from organizations who could do something about the issues that were raised. And Asha and Edna, who was quiet today, but I know is on. You guys have done a great job of how you've organized this and keep us moving, not just in the hour and a half that we have now, but in the time when we're not all together, but we still have to get things done. So I thank you, and I thank everyone for being here. And I think this was, as I said, an excellent example of if we can get together and talk about some of these things, we can come up with solutions. I wish you all a good night and a good evening.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night.
Good night,
Reminder
everybody.
that the,
Good night, everyone.
good
Good
night.
night.
Good night. Night.
Night.